What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. Now, I know it's a couple days late. The Nets were eliminated from the playoffs, I believe, Friday, so almost a week ago. But NetsBoy's life kind of got in the way of his NetsBoy videos. So I apologize if you were really eager to see the Nets boy video after the Nets got eliminated from the playoffs. But like I said, I tried to do it, but without exaggeration, I almost had no time because I normally do my videos at night, and I had to be up early in the morning the next days. I just wasn't going to stay up really late to do a video and so on and so forth. So I apologize if you were at the edge of your seat saying, when is Nets going to come out with that video? The Nets got eliminated from the playoffs. I want to hear what he has to say. And it's taken about a week. But, whatever. Either way, nothing was going to change for the Nets from Friday, so that's why I took my time. But it's currently May 7th. Like I said, the Nets were eliminated the previous Friday in Game 6 in Brooklyn. Let's take a step back and let's look at the last two games for the Nets. If you recall, Game 5 was a hard-fought game against the Hawks, obviously, in Atlanta. And the Nets were hanging around. I thought they maybe would have had a chance to steal one, but down the stretch, too much execution by Al Horford and Jeff Teague, and the Nets just fell short. Darren Williams became his old crappy self, so obviously there'll be no retraction song. Like I said, if you remember my last Nets Boy episode, I said that if Darren Williams played well the rest of the series, I would have a retraction song based off of the song that I wrote about him being terrible, but he did not. He resorted back to being the useless Darren Williams that we all come to know pretty well as Net fans. So he was useless in that game. And then Game 6, the whole team was useless. I mean, there was nothing good in Game 6. It was very anticlimactic to end it. I mean, I don't care too much that the Nets lost in the series. The Hawks were the better team. The Hawks really do deserve to make it to the second round. But I kind of wanted to see a little bit more of a fight from the Nets. I mean, Game 6 was just an embarrassment almost. They were in the first 5 games were all very close games, and then Game 6 they lost by like 20-something points, and it was that third quarter, and I mean, there wasn't much to say. Brook Lopez did okay in those games, but no one really could do anything, and that's the problem. Didn't fill out the equation that I talked about. And there just seemed like there was no fight left in the Nets, and I'm going to be straight up honest, it seemed kind of logical. It's almost like those first 5 games took everything out of them, so then Game 6, they just couldn't go anymore, and that's, it happens. And like I said, I am actually not that upset. I was a little disappointed that Game 6 wasn't competitive, but overall, if you were going to tell me the Nets would have taken the Hawks 6 games, I would have taken that for how the season went for the Nets. It's a little bit of a disappointment, but really, I mean, it definitely makes it clear, in my opinion, of some of the things the Nets need to do over the offseason. So that's what I'm going to spend this video for. I'm not going to talk too much about the NBA playoffs right now. I still think we're in for a really good ending. I think whoever wins between the Warriors and the Grizzlies, they're going to come out of the West. And whoever wins between the Bulls and the Cavaliers is coming out of the East. That's what I think. I don't believe the Hawks will be able to advance out of the East. I don't believe the Wizards will either. And I don't believe the Rockets or the Clippers can advance out of the West. So that's what I'm going to say. To me, it's between the 4 teams that are playing, the Cavaliers, Bulls, and then on the other side, the Warriors and Grizzlies. I think whoever wins those series will win the next series and go out of the finals. But I honestly, to me, both those series are toss-ups. That's why I say that. I also don't really know between the Clippers and Rockets who will win. To me, both those teams are decent, but not that great. And I think that they will lose to either the Warriors or the Grizzlies if they play them. And same thing with the Hawks and the Wizards. Whoever wins that series, I actually don't know either. I feel they will lose either the Cavs or the Bulls. That's my personal opinion. That's all I'm going to say about that because I'm going to focus this video on what I want to see the Nets do over the offseason, because this is NetsBoy. So takeaways from the overall season for the Nets. I feel like there's a couple takeaways we have to look at. First one is keep Brook Lopez. I cannot stress that enough. That's the number one point I'm going to talk about. We saw how dominant he can be towards the end of the season and in the playoffs. This is a legitimate 7-foot player who showed he can rebound the ball, which I was always, saying he could do. He averaged over 9 rebounds a game in the postseason. Very good defensive when it comes to blocks. Needs to work on his defense a little bit better, more than just blocking shots. And he also needs to work at passing out of the double team. But look, he's 27 years old. He's still got at least 3 good years of good basketball before he starts tapering off a little bit. Probably more than that. Probably 5, to be honest. But you know for sure, the key, once again, is health. But if you're the Nets, you're not going to get better than Brook. You're not. He has a player's option that we'll see what he'll do. If he waives his option and he decides to become a free agent, the Nets have to bring him back. You have to. You cannot fill that void that will be gone if Brook Lopez doesn't play. If you let Brook Lopez go, there's no center in the league that you can get to fill that void. Oh, Marc Gasol. Listen, the Nets are going to be so restricted with cap space. The only center they'll be able to get is Brook Lopez because they have his rights. Because he was currently on the team, they can go with his bird rights and give him an extension and give him more money than any other team, and you got to do it. Would I give Lopez a max contract? I personally wouldn't. I think the Nets have had their fill of max contracts. Personally, I think the contract he currently has is exactly his value. I think, what is it? He's supposed to make $16 million, I think, next season. I think that's what his value is. I think he's a $15 million player. But if Lopez's agent says, Brook, you can get paid this offseason, you should waive your contract and test the market, he will get paid. I personally hope Brook, doesn't waive his option and accepts his player's option and comes back with the Nets for another year, because I think that also could be in his best interest, because if he can have one healthy year the way he had towards the second half of the season, he would absolutely get max dollars. But either way, Billy King's got to bring back Brook. You can't let him go. You can't. You're not going to fill the void. It's just not going to be good. He's too dominant, too important of a player, and it was a huge reason why the Nets were able to make the playoffs and be a little bit of a factor in the playoffs. They got to bring back Brook Lopez. That's number one. Second thing is, don't try to hold on to Mason Plumlee. Mason Plumlee, if anything, proved that if he is not a main guy, he's quite useless. He barely did anything in the second half of the season once Brook Lopez became established. And when he was out on the court, you could see he was trying to do too much. When Plumlee was the best was when he had no one who he was really competing against. Brook Lopez was out with an injury, and then Plumlee came in and played well. Remember, that's what happened. Brook Lopez had the back injury that he was out for about 2 weeks. Plumlee played well in that span, and then Lionel Hollins continued to start Plumlee, and then Plumlee played well as a starter. But then when Brook came back and Plumlee went back to the bench, it didn't quite work out. Now, I still like Mason Plumlee as a backup center. I think if he can get his mindset on being an energy guy, rebounding and defense guy coming off the bench, giving you about 15 to 20 quality minutes of energy a game, if Mason Plumlee can wrap his head around that, I think he's a good fit. Problem is, I think Plumlee's under this impression that he should be a starter. And he could start for a couple teams in the NBA. So the second thing I want to take away is, if there's a good move that involves trading Plumlee, I think Billy King should do it. I don't think you should bank on holding on to Plumlee. I certainly wouldn't try to trade him, because I do think he's a good player to have, especially if Brook Lopez does get hurt, like he sometimes does. To have a player like Plumlee to come in and be the starter, who's proven that he can be the starter, I think is great to have on your bench. He just has to change his mindset and start thinking, instead of trying to prove that I can outplay Brook, I should be able to prove that I can play behind Brook and be an adequate bench and role player. Another thing I take away is Joe Johnson and Darren Williams have to go. At least one of them, if not both. Joe Johnson has had moments where he was okay, but the truth of the matter is he is not the same player he was even last year. Last year he had some big games, big game-winning shots. We didn't see it that much from Joe this year. Joe was very, very inconsistent. And you can't really get too mad about him because he so many times bailed the Nets out, but when it's straight down to it, his offense really comes and goes. And him and Brook Lopez don't really fit too well together because they both need to be the focal points of the offense. That being said, his contract is going into his final year of that ridiculous contract next season, so he is somebody the Nets can look to trade. If a team is looking to get out of a couple bad contracts and take on an expiring contract, because theoretically, even though it's a big, like $24 million contract, it is an expiring contract. So I think Billy King will actually have options to maybe trade Joe Johnson. And I think that it would be a good fit. Look, Joe Johnson's 34, he's entering his mid-30s. This is when players' production really start to slide. I wouldn't bank on trying to hold on to Joe Johnson. I don't think I would try to trade him where he still has a little bit of value, and get what you can get for him. I think he's still a very good player. He's still a guy who can score 20 to 30 points on any given night, give a consistent 10 to 15. 15 points. He's still an adequate go-to guy, scorer, and a decent veteran. So I think the Nets could look to try to trade him and get some good players. Now, we know I am a huge advocate for trading Joe Johnson for Rudy Gay. I've said this several times in the videos, and I'm going to say it again here. Rudy Gay signed that, like a 4 or 5 year contract extension with the Sacramento Kings. That was a terrible move by the Kings. I don't know why the Kings think that they are going to compete. They're not going to. They've proven this. They had Rudy Gay. They had DeMarcus Cousins. They even got great play from Darren Collison. They still won only like 28 games or something like that. They were not competitive. I don't know what they really think about becoming competitive. Obviously, that's why they signed Rudy Gay, because they thought that this was going to be the year that they were going to flirt with the playoffs and they could build off of this year. It's not happening. DeMarcus Cousins is great, but he's a little too inconsistent on the defensive end. Rudy Gay is all right, but they just don't have enough of anything else going on for that team. I think they're going to see that was a bad contract, and I think they're going to want to get out of it. And I've said from day one, not day one, but I said recently, I would trade Joe Johnson for Rudy Gay. Reasons why the Kings should look to do that is the Kings get out of Rudy Gay's contract. They get Joe Johnson's contract, which is bigger, but it will at least expire at the end of the season where they can make them proper moves moving forward. So it'll be a great salary dump to get out of Rudy Gay's contract. That being said, they'll need to trade a little bit more than Rudy Gay to fill up Joe Johnson's contract. I have played around with this a million times, and I've come up to this trade. Joe Johnson and Mason Plumlee, like I said, don't hold on to him too much. Joe Johnson and Mason Plumlee traded, and maybe the Boston Celtics draft pick. I think it's a 2016 draft pick. So not this draft, but the next draft pick. Those 3 picks for Rudy Gay and Carl Landry. Or Rudy Gay and Reggie Evans. Or Rudy Gay or Jason Thompson. One of those 2 players. That will work financially because Jason Thompson, Carl Landry, and Reggie Evans both have kind of big contracts too that fill up the void. That's the trade I would do. I would do that 100% of the time. Rudy Gay, Mason Plumlee, and if needed, the 2016 Boston Celtics draft pick for Rudy Gay and either Jason Thompson, Carl Landry, or Reggie Evans. Truth of the matter is, the Nets will get a good player in Rudy Gay, who will be 29 years old, who's got about 3 solid years ahead of him. He's kind of like Joe Johnson in the sense that he's kind of a little bit of an isolation guy, but can play off the ball and be a go-to guy down the stretch of games, but he's about 5 years younger. So take Joe Johnson, slash 5 years from him, and you get Rudy Gay. He's more athletic than Joe Johnson, and I think he's an overall better player than Joe Johnson, so I am all for that. And like I said, why would the Kings do that trade? They get out of Rudy Gay's contract, they get a young player in Mason Plumlee, and they get a draft pick And look, they're still going to be somewhat competitive because Joe Johnson's still a decent enough player that will keep them competitive if they want to try to compete for the eighth seed next season. They'll still be a good enough team to do that. Joe Johnson's not that bad of a player. Also, they'll get out of the contract of any of those other guys. Like Carl Landry has a pretty bad contract too, and Jason Thompson does. Like those are pretty bad contracts that they got. Why not? I do it because I don't think Rudy Gay is going to be a winner in Sacramento. I don't think that's going to work out. And I think if you're the general manager of the Kings, you should say, we jumped a little ahead of ourselves. And this would be a good way to get out of that contract and start over fresh for the 2016 season. I mean, I think that's a good trade for both teams. And I would love to have Brook Lopez and Rudy Gay on the same team together. Those two would be a tremendous 1-2 scoring punch and be huge for the Nets moving forward. The other thing that the Nets need to do, like I said, is trade Darren Williams. This is going to be the hardest thing of things the Nets should do. The hardest thing for them to do, and because Darren Williams still is supposed to make another like $22 million next year, another like $23 million the year after that. He has proven that he is an inconsistent star player. He puts up 35 points and makes ridiculous fadeaway threes one night, and then puts up 2 points the next. Now, there are teams that would possibly want an established, decent point guard. I'm going to be honest. I would rather keep Darren Williams than Joe Johnson. And why do I say that? Because Darren Williams does have good chemistry with Brook Lopez. Darren Williams also kind of works better with Brook Lopez compared to Joe Johnson. And also, as much as I like to poo-poo Darren Williams, he's still a good enough point guard where he is still someone I have no problem having the ball in his hands to control the tempo of the game. I certainly don't want him taking any last shots, which is why I want him to get Rudy Gay. But I don't have a problem with Darren Williams being the third scoring option on the team or being the floor leader and controlling the tempo of the game. I don't have a problem because he proves he can do that. Yes, he's inconsistent, but look, if you can do the trade that I just said, you got Rudy Gay and Brook Lopez as your number one and number two, there's nothing wrong with Darren Williams being an inconsistent number three scoring option and being a solid point guard. Because that's what Darren Williams is. Darren Williams is not an all-star point guard. He is not a superstar point guard. He's not a star point guard, but he is a solid point guard. You feel stability. You have stability going with Darren Williams as your point guard. Not necessarily star power, but stability, which sometimes that's all you want. So, I would like to try to see Darren Williams get traded. Problem is, I don't know who would take him. I don't even have a scenario in which a team would take him like I do with Joe Johnson. But I like to see him go as well. But I think the Nets probably are going to have to hold on to him as well. Fourth thing the Nets need to do is bring back Thaddeus Young. He is a free agent as well. He was a huge reason for the Nets to have so much success. Him and Brook Lopez really do work well together. They're a good complement to each other. They have to bring Thaddeus Young back. If you can bring back Thaddeus Young, you can do that trade, and you get Rudy Gay, Darren Williams, Rudy Gay, Thaddeus Young, Brook Lopez. That's a fantastic core in which the oldest player would be Darren Williams, who's 31 years old. So you do have a 2 to 3 year competitive window of those players really being good. And that's what I want. I think the Nets need to create a 3-year competitive window where they have a chance to compete for a title. That's what they've got to do. That's what they've got to reestablish. And that would do it. And then the fifth thing is fix the bench. The bench was very inconsistent for the Nets this season. There was moments when the bench looked fantastic, and then there was moments when the bench didn't look that good. So, you look at the bench, Jarrett Jack played well, but Jarrett Jack didn't play well with Darren Williams. It was really it was weird. If Darren Williams played bad, Jarrett Jack played good. If Jarrett Jack played bad, Darren Williams played good, but neither of them ever had a productive, neither of them were productive all the time. And really, you want your bench guys to be able to pick up the scoring pace from your starters, but you also want them to be able to work well. And let's be honest, Jack didn't work well with Plumlee. Jack didn't work well with Darren Williams, and Plumlee didn't work well with Lopez. So two of your main bench players don't work well with your starters, which means you really have to establish a separate unit. Doesn't always work. Mirza Teletovic is coming back. He is a free agent as well. I think he'll be back with the Nets. I'm pretty confident in that. I like him. I think he's a huge player. He could be a huge piece down the road. Bojan Bogdanovic, I think he's got opportunities to really establish to be a really good sixth man. I like Allen Anderson. Markel Brown I like. I think he can develop to be a really good perimeter defender if he can just score the basketball a little better. I do like Corey Jefferson. I'm going to be honest. The bench, I want him to improve, but the truth is, I think I want the Nets to get a better point guard, backup point guard. Now, Jarrett Jack has had a lot of success and made some big shots for the Nets and has been a very good player for the Nets. But I think that the Nets could get another type of backup point guard that fits better, that can play alongside Darren Williams better than Jarrett Jack. Really, Shaun Livingston was the best. He played great alongside Darren Williams. He played great backing up Darren Williams. I think that it's a really good player. Maybe you try to develop Markel Brown into a point guard. And maybe have Markel Brown be a point guard shooting guard who can back up Darren Williams and then play next to him for defensive purposes. I mean, I don't see that as that bad of a move. I think Jarrett Jack is a good player, but I would trade him because he doesn't fit well with the rest of the team. The core of the Nets is Darren Williams, Brook Lopez, at this point Joe Johnson, which I'm saying he should go, and Thaddeus Young. Those are the core players. You need to get players that complement each other. I think, if anything, that's the biggest problem that the Nets had, is they didn't have players that complemented each other. Thaddeus Young and Brook Lopez, they complemented each other. Darren Williams and Brook Lopez, they pretty much complemented each other. But Joe Johnson and Brook Lopez, they didn't. Mason Plumlee and Brook Lopez, they didn't. Darren Williams and Jarrett Jack, they didn't. So how do you fix that? You really have to trade the players that you can afford to trade to bring in complementary players. And that's what I think the Nets need to do over the offseason. I don't want them to trade Brook Lopez or let Brook Lopez go because I think he's one of the best centers in the game. I would like to see them get rid of Darren Williams, but I don't think they'll be able to because of his contract. So those two players are staying still. Obviously, because Thaddeus Young works well with Brook Lopez, you bring him back. So then there's Joe Johnson. Well, like I said, I came up with the idea to trade Joe Johnson to get Rudy Gay. I think Rudy Gay will fit a little bit better into the system than Joe Johnson did because he's more athletic and he can play off the ball a little bit better. He doesn't need the ball in his hand all the time. But then Jarrett Jack doesn't work with Darren Williams, but you can't get rid of Darren Williams because the contract's huge. You got to get rid of Jarrett Jack. Plumlee doesn't work well with Lopez. I mean, that's at the end of the world because you usually don't have them both out on the court. But if you had to choose, I'd choose Lopez. You get rid of Plumlee. So basically, what I'm trying to say is maybe they should look into letting Plumlee go though in that deal Joe Johnson deal for Rudy Gay. Maybe let Jarrett Jack go. Personally, I do like Markel Brown. I think Markel Brown could be a point guard. I think he maybe needs to develop his skill set. But I think he can certainly do that. I honestly, I would love to see Darren Williams, Allen Anderson, because Allen Anderson should start. He's such a good defensive player and I like him. I think it should be Darren Williams, Allen Anderson, trade for Rudy Gay, Thaddeus Young, and Brook Lopez as the starting lineup. I would like them to have Markel Brown as the backup point guard, Bojan Bogdanovic playing as the backup small forward, Mirza Teletovic as the backup power forward, and then to fill the void of getting rid of Plumlee in that trade, let's bring in Samuel Dallenberg. Why not? He hasn't done anything. He's a good rebounding defensive player. I liked him. I know he didn't have that much success with the Knicks. I think Samuel Dallenberg should be a really good backup center. I know he's capable of starting. I think he'd be a good fit. Maybe Emeka Okafor. He said he took this season off to get over his injuries. Maybe you bring him in next season as the backup center. Sign both those players to veteran minimum contracts. Play with those four main players. Maybe in the draft you draft a point guard or something along those lines. Maybe you trade Jarrett Jack for another point guard or another two guard. There's other options. I don't have all the answers, But the main points I'm trying to say is I want the Nets to bring back Brook Lopez, bring back Thaddeus Young, try to trade for Rudy Gay based around Joe Johnson, and be willing to part with Mason Plumlee in the deal. Try to trade Darren Williams if possible, but get a decent point guard that you can at least have who's still a solid point guard, and improve the bench, which means possibly letting go of Jarrett Jack and Mason Plumlee and anyone else. I would like them to hold on to Teletovic. Bogdanovic has grown on me, so I don't mind them holding on to him. Teletovic, Bogdanovic, Allen Anderson, Markel Brown, and Corey Jefferson are 5 of the bench players I would like them to try to hold on to. Though Markel Brown kind of started. Everyone else, I mean, why don't I just list the players I would like the Nets to try to hold on to? Brook Lopez, Thaddeus Young, Allen Anderson, Markel Brown, Mirza Teletovic, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Corey Jefferson. I like Corey Jefferson because I think he's a good third-string power forward. Those are the 7 players I like them to hold on to. I don't care if the Nets get rid of anyone else. I don't care if they get rid of Darren Williams. I don't care. I want them to get rid of Joe Johnson, to get Rudy Gay. I don't care if they get rid of Jarrett Jack. I don't care if they get rid of Plumlee. I don't care if they get rid of Karasev, who was hurt. I don't care if they get rid of Jordan. Jordan. You know, I don't really care if they get rid of those players, but the 7 are the ones that I want them to keep, and I want them to try to establish other players moving forward. But that's what I would like to try to see the Nets do this offseason. We'll see what happens with the NBA draft coming up. We'll see what happens with the free agency. Nets don't have many options in free agency, so they're really going to have to try to make some trades. But this team needs to retool, and I think we've established the key. Bring in some players that work well with Brook and build around. They also need to bring in a 3-shooter. That's the other thing. There was really not one consistent 3-shooter. I mean, Bojan Bogdanovic and Mirza Teletovic are both decent 3-shooters, but you need a dead shot 3-shooter like a Anthony Morrow, like a Wesley Matthews, like a Kyle Korver. Someone who's a dead red 3-shooter whose literally job is to shoot nothing but threes. The Nets need to bring in a guy like that, maybe as a 2-guard along those lines. I think I'd like to see that. Hey, maybe they can trade Jarrett Jack to Oklahoma City for Anthony Morrow. I'd do that. Bring back Morrow back to the Nets. I'd do that move. But overall, the Nets do have work to do this offseason. I'm excited to see what happens. I think this Nets team could shock some people next season if they get the right pieces. But they've got to try to make the right pieces. Hopefully, they try to go after Rudy Gay. I don't know if Billy King thought of that. I'm sure he has. He has thoughts about liking Rudy Gay, but I really hope that they try to make some sort of move along those lines and improve. Because the Nets cannot come back with this same team next season. It just won't work. They won't be any better. They'll be about the same, to be honest. Maybe even worse. So the Nets have to make some moves in the offseason. They got to draft a good young player with the 29th overall pick, and they've got to try to recreate. And the NBA playoffs, you know what? I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Last year, I continued to talk about the NBA Finals, but no one really cared. I didn't get many views. So, like I said, I'm just going to go and say I'm still going to stick with what I originally had. Except I actually had the Spurs in the championship. So I'm actually going to go Grizzlies versus Cavaliers, and I think the Grizzlies will win. Vince Carter might win a championship. That's what I'm going to say prediction-wise, though. I really don't know if that's true. Like I said, whoever wins between the Warriors and the Grizzlies, I think whoever wins between the Warriors and the Grizzlies are going to win the championship. I think whoever wins between the Bulls and the Cavs will come out of the Eastern Conference. That's the way I'll leave it. If I decide to do another NetsBoy episode, just keep your eyes open for it. If you would like me to continue and do, what I think about the NBA Finals moving forward or the NBA playoffs, just comment or say yes or whatever. Go ahead. Not many people comment on my videos, but if you want me to do another video maybe next week and about where we're at in the NBA playoffs, and I'll give you my analysis of what I've seen because I have been watching the games. Let me know. Comment on this video. Say, NetsBoy, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? And I'll post a video for it. If not, I probably won't post a video until something happens with the Nets. So that being said, I guess you'll just have to keep your eyes open. So, in wrap up, longest video that I've ever done, 30 minutes, but that's because was a lot to talk about. So if you managed to listen for these full 30 minutes, hey, good for you. Yeah. And once again, I'd like to thank you all for listening to my videos, because this is the unofficial end of season 2 of NetsBoy. So it's a little disappointing. The Nets lost, a little anticlimactic the way they did it, but once again, I thank you so much for bearing with me and my mediocrity on these videos, and I really appreciate every single one of my 22 subscribers, or is it 23, and every one of my viewers. So I thank you all again, and we'll see what happens. So keep your eyes open if there be another NetsBoy episode in the future. Just check. And until then, thank you again. And this is NetsBoy signing off.